Directed and co-written by Kyle Vale. We are talking ZOMBIECON Volume 1. And this is a 2024 movie, or at least that is how it is displayed, because as I believe this is actually a reskinned version of a 2018 movie simply called ZOMBIECON, re-released with a slightly new title and as a new film. So, ZOMBIECON Volume 1, what's it all about? Well, it focuses on a group of 4 cosplaying friends who are all anime enthusiasts, and for a kind of story reason, a MacGuffin if you like, one of this group ends up kind of making a wish where she wishes that assholes will become zombies. And it doesn't take long before assholes start to become zombies. And the greater the asshole, the worse the zombie. And it's up to this kind of group of 4 cosplaying friends to use their props and things and their samurai swords and all the rest of it to try and fight their way across Los Angeles to try and rescue one of their mothers. Ultimately coming to face off against a rival group of cosplayers. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So this one actually is relatively highly rated on IMDb by the looks of it, and is largely positive in regards to its feedback. What did I like about it? Now, it's clearly a low budget film. So if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know that we primarily specialise in lower budget movies, so that's fine. And it's a film which is kind of steeped in fandom, steeped in geek culture. These group of protagonists are all sort of clearly geeks for one flavour or another, primarily anime, but they dress up as Guardians of the Galaxy at the beginning of the movie. And so there's some kind of fun little nods and references and things like this to geek culture, cosplaying in particular. Conventions and things like that. So if you're a fan of this kind of subculture, if you like, of geekdom, of nerdy things, anime, then you may enjoy some of the kind of the shenanigans and the kind of the references and things like that, the little props, the background things that you'll see in this movie. The zombies themselves, I've got to say, I kind of liked. Now, in a number of ways. So the idea that it's kind of like a magical MacGuffin, basically, where assholes turn into zombies is obviously quite a unique way of setting up a kind of zombie apocalypse. So it's quite fun, makes it sort of quite unique. It also means you have different sort of capabilities for the zombies, so to speak, because the worse they are, the worse the zombies are, effectively. So that in itself, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because, you know, asshole is probably somewhat of a subjective term, to be honest. You know, what some person might think of as an asshole, another person might not, so whatever. But it is what it is. It's still like a fun little idea. And just some sort of subtlety in regards to some of the actual look of the zombies. For example, they have this kind of like glowing sort of red eyes, but it's relatively subtle. And it kind of makes them look more like vampires or kind of possessed people in some respects, rather than zombies. And it's just quite a cool effect. It's not overdone. You may even miss it potentially. So I just thought it was quite good. And they're obviously relatively recent zombies, so there's no sort of like massive decayed ones and stuff. But there's a reasonable amount of kind of prosthetic work done on here, little kind of like bulbous pustules and things and blood and stuff. And when the movie does get bloody, there's plenty of the red stuff. It gets kind of sprayed everywhere. Although I wouldn't necessarily say this movie is necessarily gory, exactly. It is kind of bloody, and as I say, having these sort of anime props and geek props used as sort of armour and weapons makes for a kind of a sort of a fun concept. And this movie is obviously somewhat of a horror comedy. It's not trying to be particularly sort of serious and stuff, so there are some kind of lighter moments in this film, and it's kind of has this sort of irreverent sort of kind of tone about it, really, and it has this kind of lighter touch, you might say. So that's what I think works in this film. Where does it not work for me? Now, as I've mentioned, I think this movie is from what I've seen at the very least, for the most part, is relatively, has been relatively well received. I've got to be honest with you, I'm going to be the contrarian on this one, because I have to say, I struggled to finish this movie. I've said the pieces that I think work in this movie, but for the most part, I thought this movie was a little bit of a chore to sit through. Why? Why do I say that? Now, it's a low budget movie, but I can appreciate low budget films, so that's not necessarily the case here. For me, I thought that the problems start with our characters. I didn't think the characters were particularly likeable. It's kind of like a wall of noise. They're like a screaming, shouting bunch of annoying people, if you want my honest opinion. So I really failed to connect to any of these sort of characters. They just seemed quite obnoxious to me. Clearly, other people like the characters, but I found them to be very, very sort of tedious and tiresome to watch. They're just the constant sort of screaming and shouting and just sort of general annoying behaviour did not make me want to spend time with these people, let alone have to kind of watch a whole movie's worth of them. The movie also is I've got to be honest with you, a little dull. So the first act of the movie is sort of the setup, the cosplaying events, and I've been to a few anime conventions and regular kind of geek conventions. You can see videos on this very channel. I've got to say this looks very low rent, and you know, considering these are meant to be sort of career cosplayers, I've got to say the cosplay is not exactly top drawer. I'll be honest with you. So I was a little bit disappointed with the kind of this. I mean, why not film an actual convention? It looks like they've just got a few people together. Why not film at an actual convention? Surely that would have been the better option. But you know, it is what it is. So yeah, so we spend a bit of time in the convention, and then the second act of the movie is all them sitting in this apartment talking about basically the zombie apocalypse. And again, with lots of kind of shouting and noise, this wall of noise that these characters permeate through the entire movie. And it isn't until the final act do we actually get out of the apartment and try and get across town to try and save the mum. And there's a couple of zombie, incursions, but nothing of grand scale or anything like that. And again, I appreciate this is a low budget movie. Certainly the third act was the more interesting of the one, but it's a little bit too late. So the movie's characters aren't particularly kind of interesting. The acting isn't particularly strong. Again, I appreciate it's a lighter touch, this film. I appreciate it's a horror comedy, but even so, I didn't think the acting was particularly strong for the film that it's trying to be. The movie, I don't think on a technical level is particularly kind of well shot, I have to say. Though I think the third act is the best, it's very dark. The cinematography is very dark. It's hard to see what's kind of going on. I appreciate it's the night, but it's difficult really to see what's going on. There's some kind of choppy sort of editing and things like that. So I didn't particularly kind of like that. The whole premise, fun as it is, as I've said, I think it's flawed. Again, it's just this like magical item that is just kind of found, and it's really no kind of explanation. It's just like a MacGuffin, really. Whatever. So, and then it's just like, okay, so assholes become zombies, but who determines who's an asshole, sort of thing? Is it presumably this girl, what she presumed as an asshole? But does that mean that only affects people that she's met? But it doesn't seem to be, because it's the whole of Los Angeles and stuff. So it's a little bit sort of fast and loose with its kind of mythology, and it's interesting and kind of unique a setup as it is. It's kind of stupid, to be honest with you. The final confrontation with this group of rival cosplayers, not exactly the cinematic clash one would potentially hope for. The movie as a whole is a little bit of a struggle to watch. I appreciate it's clearly got some fans of this film. I found it to be not charming at all, which I think maybe some people do find this movie, but to me it was actually quite torturous to sit through the runtime of this film. I found the characters particularly unlikable and annoying. The pacing was slow. When we do get our zombies, it's too little, too late, and overall I have to say I thought this movie was quite poor. I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 10, but there are fans of it out there, so let me know your thoughts if you've seen it. Please do let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.